So after a full day of technical sessions and conferences, it's now probably the best part of the day because we are going to have very exciting presentations, and I want to thank you to attend this global networking forum. We had already first presentation this morning with Jan Werner speaking about the Lucerne conference, which allowed ESA to consider progress for future projects. And tonight we are going to have a very interesting presentation, and the first one will be given by Clayton Mowry from Blue Origin, and he will explain to us how Blue Origin plans to develop a step-by-step approach to low-cost access to space. I've been knowing Clay for many years, since we have been working together in the past, and he's always very, very shining, and I am sure that tonight it will be a very shining presentation. So please give a warm welcome to Clayton Mowry, who is now lead for sales, marketing, and customer experience at Blue Origin. Clay.
Thank you, Jean-Yves, and thank you for the warm welcome. You know, in my old job, I was used to introducing Jean-Yves. So this is, I think, the first time it's been in reverse, or he's had to introduce me. So it's nice to have the introduction. Thank you for coming to hear me speak and to learn a little bit about Blue Origin. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you to the IAF for inviting me to speak at the GNF this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm here tonight to, do I get the slides on the screen here? Yep, there we go. Okay, thanks. I'm here to talk about what we call a step-by-step approach for low-cost access to space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the formerly secretive company called Blue Origin, give you a little bit of insight into what we're doing, and really talk a little bit about our philosophy, our approach, how we want to lower the cost of access to space, and really what our founder, Jeff Bezos, what his vision is for space. So if I could just start first with the name, Blue Origin. And a lot of people ask me Blue Origin, or some people will say Blue Horizons. I don't know where, I get that a lot, Blue Horizons. So Blue Origin, we are all of Blue Origin. If you remember Carl Sagan and talked about the pale blue dot, we are all of Blue Origin. It means planet Earth. And it really implies that we are going to go out and explore the galaxy, right? Explore the solar system. So we will all be of Blue Origin. The other question I get a lot is, why the feather? What's with the feather? Well, the feather really is, it embodies flight, and it's nature's perfection. In flight, it also is floating, right? So if we think about weightlessness and floating, so it's a bit more sublime. You know, most companies have a swoosh of some kind, or some kind of Star Trek type emblem, but we chose a feather. We think it's a bit more sublime and a little bit more illustrative of what our goal is, both in flight and in weightlessness, ultimately to put people into space. So we start, who are we? Or as I like to say, Blue who? So we have a vision, and the vision, simply stated, is a future where millions of people are living and working in space. It's a long-term vision. This is, I'm challenged every time I come to work at Blue Origin not to think in terms of the next 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, but to think 20 years or 30 years out, and what can we achieve? And really this is driven by our founder, Jeff Bezos. He wants to enable a future with people actually living and working in space. So this means platforms in space. It means manufacturing in space, mining in space. This is a future where we envision that the heavy industry is no longer here on planet Earth. Earth is a residential zone. It's green grass, it's clean water, and you've taken all these polluting industries, you put them into space. And Jeff often reminds me, he says, you know, we've sent probes to every other planet in our solar system, and I can tell you, this is the best one, right here where we are. And so really it's about how do we have sustainability on Earth long term, and by using space to do that. And I find that to be a compelling vision, a bit maybe different than some of the other things you may hear from some of the new companies. So we want to enable safe, low-cost access to space. You see here the propulsion module for our new Shepard vehicle, and this is really how we're teaching ourselves to do that. We also believe that people get good at things that they practice. And this system allows us to practice. It allows us to practice frequently at a very, very low cost, less than 1/50th of the cost of an orbital launch system. So really, again, the philosophy here is to do it and do it many times. So, I'll talk a little bit about this guy. So you may have heard of a company called Amazon. He is the founder and CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. He really was inspired by when he was a very young boy, when he was 5 years old. He's 53 now, and he saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. And he really vowed to himself as a young boy that if he ever had the resources, he wanted to enable spaceflight and go to space himself. So this is really his passion from at a very early age. He often talks about that he really won the lottery with Amazon. He founded that company in 1994. You can look him up on Google. I can't remember where he ranks now in terms of wealthiest. Number 3. I get number 3 here. So he's a very wealthy individual, but he's a pretty down-to-earth guy. I can tell you. I end up working with him quite a bit, but he is really passionate about space, and he's basically taking the money that he made with Amazon, and he's taking a huge portion of that and putting it into Blue Origin. And so the vast majority, and I can't give you an exact percentage, but the vast majority of our funding, well over 90%, is coming directly from Jeff, and he continues to do this year after year, and he has a very, very long-term view and commitment to this. So we have this expression, you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. He's in for many, many, many dollars. So the other thing he brings to the table is a customer focus. So his work at Amazon is really about the customer. He often talks about having an empty seat at the table whenever they have meetings, and that seat's supposed to represent the customer. And so my job as vice president leading sales and marketing for the company is to make sure we maintain a customer focus no matter who, whether it's human astronauts, human space flight, or putting satellites or other things, other platforms into orbit to maintain our focus on the customer. I just add that the company was actually founded in the year 2000. People think we're a new company. People think that we're new to the scene. In fact, it's almost 17 years now that the company has been around. It was very, very secretive for more than almost 15 years. I would say 13, 14 years. They were in a very nondescript building, and I'll talk a little bit about our headquarters location. No sign on the door, no sign outside. I drove past it the first time I went there. I was going for my interview, and what? Oh, okay, it's back here. So it's part of his, I guess, his persona. Jeff really wants to go out and prove and to achieve and to really develop technology and then talk about it once it's been done. So it's a bit of a different approach again. And just here, the quote, if he's 80 years old and he finds himself looking back and he's actually enabled low cost access to space, he's going to die a happy guy. So really this is his philosophy. So a bit about the company and our location. So our headquarters is in Kent, Washington State, up in the Pacific Northwest. We're about 10 minutes from SeaTac Airport. So if you're in the area, if you find yourself in Seattle, which is a growing space sector out there with a number of companies, Planetary Resources and others. SpaceX, in fact, has 200 people working out there. There's lots of companies in the Pacific Northwest, and if you're in the area, please let us know. It's a wonderful tour of our factory. It's a bit like being in Willy Wonka's rocket factory, as I describe it. We have over 850 people working at our facility in Kent. We're growing quite rapidly as a company. In fact, I started 5 months ago in the job. We were 800 people in the company, roughly, and here we are 5 months later, we're over 1,000. I checked the number. It's 1,024 people as of 2 days ago. So we also have a huge facility down in Van Horn, Texas, which is if you fly to West Texas, you land in El Paso, you get in a car and drive about 2.5 hours, and you find yourself at our Van Horn facility. So what we have there is about 290,000 acres that have been acquired by Jeff, and he's basically bought up a bunch of ranch land there and created our own spot for both testing engines and doing our new Shepard flights. And so you're in the middle of the desert in West Texas and making a lot of noise and flying things up and back into space. Seems like a nice place to do that, and they like that. We also have a new office that I'm co-leading in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, with Brett Alexander, my colleague. Brett's responsible for engines and government relations. I'm doing sales and marketing for the company. And so we have about a dozen people there now. The facility, by the way, in Texas has over 100 people in it. Down in Cape Canaveral, Florida, is where we're building our factory to build the new Glenn, as well as establishing our launch pad there at what used to be the old Atlas Pad Launch Complex 36 and parts of Launch Complex 11. So this factory is what I call beyond huge. I'm going to show you some more recent pictures there, but it'll ultimately have 300 or 400 people there building rockets for us in Florida. We're also going to be siting an engine production facility, a full-scale engine production facility. Right now we do low-rate production design in our Kent facility for our BE-3 and BE-4 engines, as well as the new Shepard propulsion module and capsule. But we will be, in the coming months, announcing a full-scale engine production facility in another state in the U.S. So we'll have quite a large footprint. A little bit about our technology. And so let me show you a picture here of our new Shepard suborbital launch system and a bit of a timeline. So let me first say, why suborbital? Well, again, we can fly this system many times. We can practice, we can learn from this system. We can practice vertical takeoff landing. Not only that, but the continued and what we call operational reusability aspect of the engine. So reusability does not make sense if you have to take the engine out every time, if you have to x-ray the engine, if you have to do major overhaul. Really, reusability makes sense if you can fly it more like an aircraft, where you can fly it to space, land, do some brief inspection of the engine, and then refuel and fly again. And so this is really our goal. The vehicle you see here, in fact, my second week on the job, I got to visit our facility in Texas, and I was at the October 5th flight of the booster. The first flight that we conducted, it was a successful ascent, but we had a hydraulic failure, and the propulsion module itself actually crashed in the desert, or as we say, a hard landing. A little bit more dramatic than that. I wasn't there. But the other vehicle, the second vehicle that we had, the second propulsion module, that vehicle and the capsule in fact has flown 6 times, because the first flight it came down successfully. But the propulsion module itself, that flew to space and landed successfully, and then repeated that 5 times. So this is a historic rocket ship. It was the first to ever do that and fly again, to land vertically and take off and fly again. It'll probably end up in the Smithsonian Museum someday. I won't, it's not been disclosed yet that that's the case, but I would expect it'll be there, a Museum of Flight in Seattle or somewhere distinguished. It is, has been in our factory, in fact, most recently, last few months after it flew. So you may have seen some pictures on social media with people standing besides this booster. It's now at the Mars conference that Amazon hosts, and you'll probably be seeing it in some other places. I won't give up all the news, but you'll probably be seeing that propulsion module around as you go to space events in the coming years. So a fantastic achievement with this, and I guess one more point to add here. We view this a little bit like the early days of aviation with barnstorming, and so this is we're sort of barnstorming space with this vehicle. The capsule is designed to carry 6 astronauts to space above the von Karman line, and then return them softly to Earth, and we're going to be doing that within the coming months and years. So let me show you a video we have here from an April flight.
5, 4, command engine start, 2, 1, 0. Lift off. Your Shepard is clear of the tower. Approaching max Q. PM confirmed separation, 250,000 feet.
CC apogee, 339,000 feet.
These are from actual cameras in the capsule, obviously. So we deploy 3 chutes, soft landing, cushion of air just before impact on the desert floor.
Engine is running. We have thrust.
The booster relights at about 3,000 feet.
Touchdown.
So the engine can throttle down to 20%. And this is why we have a very, very soft landing on the back. 4.8 miles per hour. So there have been attempts at what I call operational reusability. We all know about the shuttle, of course. What was interesting with the video here is that the same vehicle, the first 3 times we flew it, we never took the engine out. We did some bore scoping. We did visual inspection of the engine, but we simply refueled and flew it again. And this vehicle could have flown several more times. It does get a little bit battle scarred, I will say. When you see it up close, the paint job is a little bit damaged from the last one we did, we had an escape test, so it actually took thrust from a solid rocket motor, 10,000 pounds of thrust, so it's a bit damaged on the top. But even on the sides, you get a little bit of scarring, you get a little bit of thermal environment. So what we do typically between the flights is we will hand patch up some of the places on the thermal protection system, and we don't repaint the vehicle, we just fly it again. And so it's fully operationally reusable. Get the slides back up, please. Thank you. So step by step, ferociously, or gradatim ferociter. This is our slogan. You'll hear it time and again, and it's our approach to reusability. So, by the way, these are not drawn to scale, the 2 vehicles. I have to note that. The new Shepard is much smaller than that in reality compared to the new Glenn. But I wanted to show it to show a little bit about our approach here. They're both reusable systems. They're both vertical landing of the propulsion, the main core stage. We're going to be using the new Shepard on suborbital flights and the new Glenn on orbital missions. On the new Shepard, you have this crew capsule on top, a propulsion module that actually has 3 segments to it: a forward, a mid with the tanks, a dome and tanks, and an aft. We're going to use more or less the same type of approach with New Glenn. The new Shepard is powered by a liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen engine, a LOX hydrogen engine. The BE3, it stands for Blue Engine 3, very complex taxonomy there. And for the new Glenn vehicle, we'll be using the BE4 or Blue Engine 4, which is a liquid oxygen and liquefied natural gas engine, LOX methane engine. We're also developing upper stage, the U, BE3U and BE4U means upper stage versions or vacuum versions of both of those engines. So those systems are in development right now. We talk about this step-by-step approach. We really like to think of ourselves, if you know about the famous fable of the tortoise and the hare, we like to think of ourselves as the tortoise. We think we're going to win the race, but we want to do it slowly. We want to make sure that we understand the technology, we understand our systems. We don't want to be in a hurry or be in a rush to achieve what we think. Jeff likes the expression, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's how he believes we're going to get to achieve our goals. So, a little bit of a piece here on our engine technology. Again, the company has been around since 2000. We've been steadily in those quiet years developing engine technology. And so originally starting with a monoprop engine, the BE1, then moving to RP1, then to liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen on a pump-fed system with the BE3, which we're still employing today, and then moving to a vacuum version of that engine, and the BE4, which is, as I said, LOX LNG. I put, and this is to scale the ULA's Vulcan vehicle. We expect ULA to select us with the BE4 to power their Vulcan next generation launch system. So we're eagerly awaiting the final. They've been working with us on the development of the BE4 engine. Originally, we were designing a 400,000 pound thrust version of the BE4. ULA came to us, approached us, knew what we were doing, and asked if we would move that up to a 550,000 pound thrust engine. And so we're doing that, working with them, and it'll be a single engine part that would fly on both the New Glenn and the Vulcan vehicle. So a little bit about our technology from the engine testing standpoint. I mentioned this rather large facility we have out in the West Texas desert. We believe we're doing more liquid propulsion engine testing there than almost any other place on the planet. And most people are unaware of this. So we have two very huge test stands down there. One's called GEEKS for Giant Experimental Test Stand. The other called ZEEKS for Extremely Large. I'm not in charge of the naming, but okay. And so you can see pictures of both of these. One is obviously hydrogen. The other is liquefied natural gas. We have done we did over 550 engine tests there in 2015. We average about 2 engine tests a day, both cold fire and cold flow and hot fire engine testing. We've got pre-burner test facilities. We've been doing power pack testing for the engines. And you see down here a picture that was tweeted out 2 weeks ago. This is a full-up BE4 engine. I watched it during its final assembly in the factory in Kent a few weeks ago, and here it is being shipped out, and it is now sitting on the test stand in Texas, and we're getting ready to hot fire that engine in the coming weeks. So we're moving quite well along in that. Again, I described going from a 400,000 pound thrust version of the engine to a 550,000 pound thrust. We are doing all kinds of testing down there, looking at startup, shutdown transients, power pack at full throttle. So doing a lot of verification right now, instrumentation, making sure that, again, we fully understand what we're testing and how we're testing as we go along. Our approach is to thoroughly test before we're going to fly something. And so we really want to have hundreds of firings of these engines before they actually go into actual flight. Just a quick slide. I'm not the quality mission assurance guy, so I won't bore you with this, but the woman who's in fact our lead of quality mission assurance comes to us from United Launch Alliance, Linda Tyree, and before that she spent 30 years at the Air Force working on launch systems. We take a very much a methodical and tried and true approach to quality and mission assurance. We have 6 basic principles. We hire great people. We give them, we think, the right culture, world-class facilities and tools, a streamlined, controlled process with disciplined execution. We are trying to have robust vehicles. You hear we say the word robust a lot. We try to over-design everything. I'll talk about a little bit of why is the vehicle so large, because it needs to be robust. We have judicious oversight and review and continuous improvement of our process. So, and I'll just back up for a second and say that as a company, those 1,000 employees, about 30% roughly of those employees have over 20 years experience. We're taking these people from a lot of the companies that you know, the old space, I hate that word, old space companies, but they're coming from Rocketdyne, from ULA, from Boeing and Lockheed Martin and other places. And about another 30% roughly of the company is people with 10 plus years experience. So these are, you know, we have the bulk of our employees are industry veterans that come with a background. Some people come from outside the industry. Our head of structures comes from Sea Ray, the boat company, for instance. So we do look to draw from the automotive industry, from other industries, the aircraft industry and other industries as we're developing technologies. And then, you know, roughly 30 to 40%, the youngest, are folks out of engineering programs with a few years experience. So it's a very diverse workforce. There's lots of folks with gray hair walking around, so it's okay to be a little bit older, like myself in the factory. You don't get funny looks. It's not just a bunch of 20-year-olds, but it's a good place to work. We have very, very low turnover. We're less than 4% turnover. Some of that's just natural, but we found that people really love working at Blue. So let me talk to you a little bit about the New Glenn system that we unveiled 2 weeks ago at the satellite conference in Washington, D.C. So, you know, again, the nomenclature, obviously New Shepard, I didn't explain this, but maybe it was obvious that it's named after Alan Shepard, the first American to go into space. New Glenn, of course, named after Senator John Glenn, rest his soul, who was the first American to orbit the Earth. And we have plans, as you can imagine, for a new Armstrong. So goes the nomenclature for our systems. You know, John Glenn was an American hero, obviously, and an inspiration, and an amazing, not only amazing astronaut, test pilot and astronaut, but United States Senator, and one who went back and flew again on the shuttle. You know, we were honored to, to work with his family and to name the vehicle, this vehicle after him. Jeff, so Senator Glenn actually wrote a letter to Jeff Bezos on November the 28th. It was actually not presented to Jeff until, in fact, the day that John Glenn passed on December the 8th of 2016. Jeff was speaking at a conference, and astronaut Mae Jemison was there on stage and actually read this letter, surprised Jeff and read this letter to him on that day. It was quite a moving event, as you can imagine, for Jeff, but you know, you can find the letter online if you want to read the whole thing, but basically Senator Glenn talked about how touched he was that Jeff had chosen to name this vehicle after him, and how honored he was, and that he saw a day when we're boarding rocket ships just like we're boarding aircraft. And so that was, I think, a really touching moment. This is a digital rendering, an artist rendering of what the New Glenn rocket would look like in flight. We think it's a beautiful vehicle. It's a little bit unique, right? There's some features there. We just started showing these off. Maybe you've seen them or not. But we have these fins on the bottom, these, what we call them strakes, that provide lift for the vehicle as it increases L over D on reentry of that core stage when it comes back. We have steerable fins on the upper part of the vehicle. It's a 7-meter diameter core. It's 23 feet in diameter. It's a very large launch system. Jeff unveiled this at the satellite show the other day. I'd say the other thing about it, both the strakes and the control systems we have, it provides a very robust system, not only for takeoff, but for landing. We're landing on a ship 400 nautical miles downrange. We need to, just like in the days of the shuttle where they had to check the landing sites, we need to make sure that the weather where we're going to land this core stage at sea is suitable for us to launch. And we want to have robust availability during our launch campaigns. And so we're trying to get to 95% availability and having this system with incredible cross range that's going to land on a moving vessel. These lift and control services that we have provide us with, we think, an exceptional amount let's say, again, robust capability. So here's a picture. In fact, it was tweeted out last September, except without the strakes the last time it came out. But it just shows you, in comparison, how large this New Glenn system is. We have a two-stage and three-stage variant. The two-stage, again, powered by 7 BE4 engines on the core, 1 BE4 upper stage. The three-stage, 7 BE4s, 1 BE4U as the second stage, and then a single BE3U as the third stage. The two-stage version of the vehicle stands at 82 meters, or 270 feet in height. The three-stage is 95 meters, or 313 feet in height. It obviously towers over a lot of the existing systems. Even just the core stage itself is 54 meters. It's a little bit taller than an Ariane 5 today. So it's a very large system. And again, we're building this. Why so big? It's to be robust. It's to be able to reuse the system multiple times. And those engines that I described, by the way, are designed for 100 uses. We're never going to fly them 100 times. We don't expect to fly New Glenn 100 times, but we want to over-design the system in a lot of ways so that we can get a lot of reusability out of that core stage. A little bit about the performance of the vehicle. we can provide with just the two-stage version of the vehicle 45 metric tons of performance to low Earth orbit and up to 13 metric tons of performance to geostationary transfer orbit. Again, it's powered by 7 of these engines on the core stage. The tank diameter is 7 meters. These are conservative numbers, by the way. We like to, overperform, under-promise, overperform, however you want to put it. We want to be conservative. We think we can do better than this, but until we test the engine, hot fire the engine, and we really understand the ISP and what we're operating in, we want to be conservative. So my engineers are saying, Clay, don't overpromise in terms of performance just quite yet. Let's see how we do through experience, and then we'll release some margin, more of a classical approach again to this. A bit about the stages. Again, I mentioned this before. We have three segments to this first stage: a forward, mid, and aft module. It's much designed in the way, although we've reversed the control fins from the new Shepard system, but it's designed very much like the new Shepard propulsion module, only at a much taller, obviously much larger scale. The two-stage version that we're going to be flying of the vehicle will be focused on low Earth orbit and commercial payloads for low Earth orbit constellations and geostationary satellites. The three-stage version, when we get to that, is going to be looking for things that are more exploration type missions, cislunar and other missions, and that'll be several years from now. You can see also on the stage that we have 6 landing gear. So this gives us more stability again on landing, less likely that we might tip over in one direction or the other, and we can actually land on 5 gear, so we have gear out landing capability. So people say to me a lot, why LNG, why methane? It's about 95% pure methane, liquefied natural gas. Why use this? You know hydrogen, everyone knows RP1, knows LOX kerosene systems. Why would you move to an LNG system? Well, there's a number of reasons that we've chosen LNG, and none of them have to do with in situ resources. They start actually with the fact that it's green, and if you're designing an operationally reusable system, you want a green propellant. You want something that people can examine the engine, that can get it ready for reflight, that there's not going to be any toxic element, any accelerants that you have to add to this. It's also a commercially available fuel, abundantly commercially available these days. There's a lot of LNG out there. You can get it from multiple sources, and you can get very high grade versions of it. And the cost is, in fact, 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of RP1. So it's a much cheaper fuel when you're going to be actually firing this thing a lot and reflying it a lot. Really, over the course of that life cycle of the engine, you're actually going to save millions of dollars in fuel cost, even though fuel is one of the lowest costs overall when we're looking at designing these systems. It's oxygen-rich stage combustion cycle engine. As I said before, it's 550,000 pounds of thrust. We also are building in deep throttle ability into this engine, which is another reason we like it, and we think we can have down to 30% thrust on this engine, which should be more than adequate for landing on the floating platform. So first launch is anticipated in the second half of 2020. We're benchmarked to industry performance in terms of our envelope, what we're going to be flying for satellites. So acoustic, shock, vibe, sign, all those things we want to be benchmarked to everyone else. We're announcing a 5.4 meter fairing and even a 7 meter, ultimately a 7 meter fairing. We'll see where the demand is for the market. We're going to meet all the performance of the existing systems and the future systems that we see planned in the coming years on the launch marketplace. We were proud to announce our first customer on the stage at Satellite, Eutelsat, based here in Paris, for our first geostationary launch contract. And then the next day we talked about 5 contracts for OneWeb, which is a global constellation of satellites trying to connect the world and bring internet to underserved regions of the world. So pleased to have our first 2 customers for this system under our belt, and we appreciate their confidence in our ability. A little bit about our facilities. Is this real? Are you just showing me PowerPoint slides, Clay, or is there something more here? How are you going to get from this little factory in Kent, well, it's actually a big factory in Kent, to what you're talking about with this enormous launch vehicle? So We have a significant footprint in Florida that we're developing here, what we call our orbital launch site, or OLS. We're establishing that at Launch Complex 36, which is an old Atlas pad. It was home for 145 Atlas missions over 40 years. So we're pleased to be right now taking that over. I was down there 2 weeks ago. We're now excavating all the concrete. I stood on top of the old bunker there and could see all the layout. So there's a lot of construction going on there, a lot of heavy machinery, and getting ready to lay out the structure for our launch facility there. It's going to include the launch pad, the integration facility for the launch vehicle, a refurbishment facility for that core booster, as well as a test stand for acceptance testing of those BE-4 engines that will be built in another state. We're also just outside of the gates of the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, right in Exploration Park, right if you've ever been to the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. If you look just past the rocket garden, you'll see our factory rising from the palm trees there. In that factory, we're going to be building that first stage. We're going to be building the second stage. We're going to be building the fairing, the payload fairings that I mentioned, and we'll be building the adapters for the launch vehicle, all in that same facility. And down below, you can see Port Canaveral. That's where the ship, when we land on the ship, it'll come back. So all of this is quite close. It's really within 10, 11, 12 miles of it. And it's that way on purpose, because this system is 23 feet in diameter. We can't just drive it down any road. So it's all close together on purpose. The whole architecture is done that way intentionally. So you can see in the upper left-hand picture here the facilities that we're constructing in Florida. This is the Beyond Huge factory I mentioned. It's in total, with the 3 buildings there, over 750,000 square feet of factory. It's really quite massive. You can see here on the right-hand side what it's going to look like when it's finished. There's a couple of core, just to give you some scale there, and some cars, what the facility is going to look like. It's very, very impressive how quickly this is being built. Every week they're putting up a new wall and a new, the roof is on now, and it'll be finished by December of this year. We're investing $250 million in this facility, and it's going to be a 21st century complex when we're done. By the way, this was announced in September of 2015. Construction started in June of last year, putting the pilings into the sand. We already have occupied the annex building. You can see it just under the $250 million. That's where we actually already have our machinery in place to build the domes for our tanks. So total of 27 months from start to finish to get this thing done and built. So a little bit about mission operations. What's our concept of operation here? You can drive your satellite there. You can land on the skid strip or at Cape Canaveral. You can we'll come and meet you there. We'll drive over to Astrotech for their payload processing facility work. We're going to manufacture the fairings here in our facility, bring them over, encapsulate in a vertical position, and then drive them over to our facility on the launch complex, where we're going to do a breakover maneuver, and then we're going to mate horizontally. So this will be a horizontal system, much like the Russian approach or SpaceX's approach for mating. A bit about our operational tempo. We're going to be very modest in the first few years, but the system that we have down there is designed for up to 12 missions in a year. So we obviously won't get to that from the start, but that's our goal ultimately. We're looking to fly, as I said, in robust weather conditions with flexible launch windows and fault tolerance to prevent delays for scrub and recycle. So we want to be able to do surge campaigns. If we need to fly twice in a month, we want to have that capability as well. So all of this is being built in as we look at the operation concept. And as I say, it's going to take a couple of years to get going to that kind of cadence, but we think we can do that within the first 3 years of operation. So just, again, not drawn to scale. The ship's a lot bigger than that. But this gives you an idea of what a sample low Earth orbit mission profile would look like in terms of launch, stage separation, flip over maneuver. I'm going to show you a video that's a little bit better than this graphic, but just to give you an idea. And then we're going to land on a ship. It's not a barge. It's a ship. It will be underway, and it's a very large platform. It's 50 by 60 meters is where we're going to be landing this core stage on a ship underway. Why underway? Because the ship is more stable when it's moving. It's less pitch and yaw on the deck. It gives us actually, because we have good cross range, it gives us a much more stable platform to land on. Again, the philosophy of operational reusability. So here is the video. Let's take a look. On the launch pad here with the giant transporter erector. You can see it's a quite wide vehicle, 7-meter diameter. Here's a built-in test for the landing legs and a test of the control fins on the core stage. The engine plume is indeed blue because it's liquefied natural gas. And there's our factory, which will be actually facing the launch. We'll have our mission control center right there in our same factory. So, stage separation. Fairing separation. Here's the flip over maneuver. Again, the strakes providing lift on re-entry. A single engine burn just over the ship. Touchdown. And the most important part, delivering our customer to orbit. So that's Blue Origin. I hope you enjoyed a peek at what we're doing. Maybe we're not so secretive anymore. I guess maybe with me working for the company, they won't be secret anymore. So my job is to go out and tell the story. So I don't. Do you have time? Do you want to do some questions, or do you want to just go to the next GNF? Okay, we have time for questions. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
What's the Shepard ratio in LNG engine?
I can't disclose that. I know the answer, but I can't disclose it. And as I said, we have a target. We think we can exceed the target. We're being cautious at this point. Yeah.
Who's driving the ship?
It'll be autonomous. We actually looked at whether or not we could construct a fortified bunker on the ship, but there weren't a lot of volunteers. No, it'll be an automated ship. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Could you describe in the same way the maneuver which is doing the new plane?
The in-flight when it, yeah. So yeah, we have. I can't go into too much detail because there's some things, some technologies that we have in play there that are. It's going to flip this way, so it's coming this way, and then the tail will flip over. We have some very. I can't. How much can I say here? We're going to patent some of these technologies, but we have a very capable system to be able to do maneuvering when we're in space. It's different than New Shepard. The New Shepard just goes up and comes back down. Yeah. So the New Shepard is an interesting. It's an interesting system. Again, it has 3 parts to it. It has control fins on the aft. On the top part, we actually have a ring fin design, which is really, we borrowed it from a torpedo. So instead of going through the water this way in a horizontal way and using the fin to control, you have a prop on the back of the torpedo, and using the ring fin to control your direction. We use that coming in, flying back. So if you look at the booster, I don't know if we can put up a picture of it, but there's air that's rushing past the sides of the booster up through this fin, and we're using it almost like a shuttlecock. So we have 4 fins that drop off the side, and then this ring fin on the top, and then there's a system of aero brakes that also deploy as we try to decelerate in the Earth's atmosphere. You saw in the video, it's quite a jarring thing to watch. Your mind, almost difficult to process because this thing is dropping like a bullet. We deploy the air brakes, and then the engine fires just 3,000 feet off the deck. But It's coming down quite quickly. Using these the control fins at the bottom and the ring fit at the top to do the steering on the reentry. So in the case of New Glenn, we've put the steering fins up higher. We'll have a control system on the top part of the booster, and then the strakes on the bottom. The engines have, I think it's 5 degrees of gimbal, but it's going to be steering from the top. Yeah.
You mentioned the capacity of 45-ton DO, 13-ton GTO.
Yeah.
So do you have an expectation for capacity to 6-cylinder?
We haven't released that figure yet. I'm sorry. I can't tell you what we think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because in the case
It'll be robust.
Yeah, because from GTO to GO, I mean, the delta V is similar, and from GTO to the moon. So I think that if you have a market to go from GTO to geostationary, I think very similar delta V would be required.
Yeah,
so,
I think theoretically you're right. I think we're thinking more on for some of these missions, and we talked a little bit about it. It was released in the Washington Post a couple weeks ago. This idea of doing the Blue Moon concept of cargo delivery to the lunar surface. So we envision actually flying that initially on other launch systems, because obviously we're not flying now, but ultimately we could fly that with a 3-stage version of New Glenn.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
The one thing I didn't point out, which is when I talked a little bit about practicing with New Shepard versus New Glenn, and so Jeff describes it as the inverted pendulum. It's very difficult if you wanted to try to balance a pencil on your hand, on your finger, or on your palm, right? But if you have a broomstick, you're actually able to do it. And so what we think with the New Glenn, in fact, that what we're doing is landing a rocket is always very difficult, but it's even harder when it's a smaller vehicle with the New Shepard. So we think it scales actually quite well to New Glenn. And so again, as we practice with a smaller vehicle, we're getting very good at flying and repeating and understanding how we fly and land. So this is really, really baked into our philosophy. Other questions? No? No?
Which is the cost per kilogram that you're in?
And I'm not trying to be, I won't try to be cagey, but we intend to be the low cost provider. We intend to be market leading in terms of cost per kilogram. I can't give you an exact figure, but we want to be very competitive in the marketplace. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.